Okay, so we're doing the building a profession. This is actually the session I was really looking forward to because I've just developed an entire profession. And indeed, I'm now on my 4th job where I wrote my own job description and created my own job title. And I think I must be in the top percentile of the university in terms of writing job descriptions, because I think I've written over 12 to 20 job descriptions at Bristol, which still run around and people send them to me and say, have you seen this one? And I go, I wrote that. I did. So, developing a profession, we'll start off introducing all of the panel. Simon, off you go.
Hi, I'm Simon Burbidge. This is my last panel, so goodbye everybody.
That's as much as we get.
I'm Peter Hill. If you don't remember me from the panel yesterday, I'm an APSRC RSE fellow working in software sustainability within the plasma science community.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma Hogan. I'm a senior scientific software engineer at the Met Office. I'm going to take a little bit longer to introduce myself because I wanted to mention kind of like activities I'm involved in that is the reason why I'm here today. And so I am a member of our science profession learning and development team at the Met Office. And so this is a team of people that helps our science profession like provide them with learning and development opportunities. I'm also just recently got involved in the RSE competencies, which I kind of was hoping to talk about and advertise while I was here. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is I'm also involved in a project called the Transatlantic Data Science Academy, or TDSA, and that's to do with like it aims to fill the data skills gap that exists kind of in the UK and in the US, and so DSIT awarded us 2.5 million to basically create an academy that will create a talent pipeline for data scientists, data simulation scientists, data engineers and RSEs in Earth observation. So
Thank you. And Ed, off you go.
Thanks. Sorry, I was just distracted trying to Google the academy you were talking about. That sounds brilliant. So I'm Ed. This is also my last panel. I would have enjoyed chairing this, but I don't think I can do it justice remotely. Also, there seems to be some kind of network lag. Can you hear me properly?
Maybe if we do video off, Ed, that might be a way of make sure we have bandwidth. And there was not any comment about. Cool. So I think we're in a profession where we actually do create a lot of professions. So we're very undefined. We sit in a space. Obviously, the RSE community is the most famous for kind of creating a whole new profession from scratch. But the key part of creating a profession is going to go with the first question with this. When you're trying to work out what profession you do, how would you explain your profession to an 11-year-old? Simon, to an 11-year-old, this audience have the capacity of 11-year-olds, how would you describe what you do?
Oh, well, 11-year-olds are quite easy actually, because they're interested and enthusiastic. So I always talk about, I work in HPC, and we have these massive, great, huge computers, and we do all this modelling that does things like rockets and planets and weather and stuff like that. And they go, whoa, wow, and they're suitably impressed.
So you don't go, I have all these spreadsheets and all of these regulations and strategy documents.
No.
Cool.
That's not the core business. That's
Okay, Peter.
periphery.
So, well, to an 11-year-old, I'd probably talk about fusion because I'm from that background, and then say I write simulations for that. If I'm talking to perhaps somebody that doesn't know what an RSE is but is familiar with the field, I would talk about I write software for other people that run it. And then if I'm talking to somebody I'm trying to sell my particular role in their project, I would say I do the boring things that make the research better, right? All the boring things around the interesting science that you like to do, I'll do all the stuff that's around that enables you to focus more on that, things that you're interested in, rather than things that I'm interested in, like packaging.
Cool, Emma.
yeah, I think similarly to Peter, I would talk about coding and like helping scientists, like enabling them to do their research, and yeah, just helping them do their jobs just more efficiently, just through coding and like problem solving. So.
Cool. And Ed, how would you describe yourself to an 11-year-old?
So when I do this, I tend to say my team helps people make good use of the supercomputers we have at our university.
Cool. So one of the things I really liked about the answers from the panel when describing 11-year-old is you got the passion. I think it's really important when we describe ourselves in our profession, we remember that part, the bit that, you know, the passionate bit, rather than we do strategies and documents and everything else, which are rather annoying. So, like anyone in the room, how would you describe yourself to an 11-year-old? Anyone like to volunteer their description? Again, anyone online as well, if they would like to. No one has 11-year-old nephews or nieces that they talk to. Go on, Peter.
I might say that actually research today has got really complicated. There's lots of different parts, so we've started to break it down into smaller sections. So I do a more computer part so that researchers can focus more on a researcher part.
Cool. So I say, my nephew is just about to turn 10, and he found me on YouTube teaching programming, and he was very enthusiastic about learning programming, and he's now very much into R. Unfortunately, I made videos about R, not videos about Python, but that's a whole separate thing. R is fine, but yeah, anyway. When I talk to him and say, what am I doing, you know, my job, I basically point to now containers that have been lowered down, I point to big bits of kit, and I point to things and say, like, these massive computers, and he's just like, wow, you work with those things, that is amazing. And I think that's the key thing, is remembering that kind of childlike, you know, that's the passion, that's why we're all here. You know, we want to keep that as we go and get older. So, going on then to, how would you describe yourself to an 11-year-old? Let's go to the other spectrum of this. How would you describe yourself to a bank manager when you apply for a mortgage or anything like, you know, formal?
I say I do rocket science.
Do you say this to your car insurance company?
No, that would probably put the premium up. I'll say I work in a bank or a university as, like, you know, a nice secure kind of low risk kind of occupation.
No risk, no rocket fuel in that.
No rocket fuel in there, so no racing around too fast or leaving the atmosphere or anything like that.
Cool.
I find it really constrained by what's in the drop-down box. Like maybe it has software engineer. I'm not really a software engineer in the sense that they're thinking of it when they put it in the drop-down box. But maybe that's closest. Or maybe you might find like science / research / education sector. I don't feel like myself in education sector because I'm on the research side of it, although I am in university. So I feel like it's not really any of these things in the drop-down box. I pick whatever's closest on that particular day on that particular form.
Rocket science.
Yeah, cool. Emma, what to a bank?
Yeah, I mean, with the drop-down menu thing, I would pick software engineer. That's the one I go for. That's the one I think I more closely represent. I don't do much in the way of research myself, but I'm enabling others to do the research. So I see myself more of a software engineer. But yeah, if there's free text box, I put in my job role because I'm proud of being scientific software engineer. So I'm senior scientific software engineer, and that goes in as much as possible. So
Fantastic. And Ed, what do you put? Free text box. There's annoying drop downs and like where you get those membership cards when you go to that supermarket. But we can ignore that.
In the drop down, I choose IT manager. A free text box, I don't know, I would think for ages having to figure out what to put in a free text box. I wonder if, as a profession, we will know we've made it when we get into the drop down.
We should start a campaign in the drop down box. Indeed, one of the things that is most pleasing to have, so many things that I get very pleased by, I actually have RSEs I know, and they post me or email me pictures of the birth certificates of their children, where they've put down on the birth certificate research software engineer is their occupation, and that is so nice to see. And like, you know, on that question, if it was a birth certificate, what would you put down as your job title?
Research software engineer.
Yeah,
Free
senior.
form.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this is really important. We need to be proud of our titles. And I know one of my sort of RSEs was very annoyed by his title because it was specialist scientific compute support / comma thing research, and I always felt very guilty. I never got him converted over to RSE. But we need to be proud of our job title. This brings on to the next question. Do we in the DRI community need to agree on the same job title or the same name for what we do?
Just so before, when I started this role in 2015, before I heard about RSE, my job title was Computational Physics Research Officer, which was globally unique. I didn't find any reference to that string, returned 0 hits on Google. And so I was very, very happy to discover RSE and that community. In fact, yeah, that's me. So I think and that term doesn't cover everybody here.
Yeah.
We saw on like the first day this idea of the different facing roles. You know, this is a really broad community. So I'm not sure I quite like DRI as a kind of catch-all term. It doesn't. DRI what? I feel DRI professional doesn't acronym very well.
That is better than associate RSE, as I was told.
So that was made after CPRO. It was a RSE, which
I always say it's the R is about, so it's an RSE, please. Cool. So, job title, I agree, I think job title is really important. I think it's part of the identity we were talking about before on one of the other panels that you hold on to, and I think it would be a real shame to lose that distinctiveness. But also we're moving into a world where all of the other kind of non-research, non-professional service professions are ballooning. So I know I work with data scientists, we now have MLOps engineers, we have SecOps officers, we have DevOps people. And so one of the driving things when we were creating the Embark career is basically combining all of that together, which is why we ended up, we were told we had to use AI, told we had to use supercomputing, so it was AI, supercomputing, infrastructure, support engineer, specialist and lead. We tried, because again we were told we can't use junior, senior because it's ageist. Which I think is the right thing. And then I was told you're now allowed to say that again, and it was like, well, I came up with these words. But I think there's a danger when we use such a broad thing that it means that it becomes slightly meaningless, but there's also a danger that if we do a narrow thing, it becomes exclusionary. So with the panel, how would you balance, if you're working with teams of multiple different types of DRI, how would you balance a name that would not create silos, but equally create a sense of identity?
That's a really good question, and that has been discussed a lot for a long time, probably 10 years or so. It's fraught with difficulty as well. So I think I really like the way you've done it with the Musenbard, with the last part of all of the titles, which show levels of experience and therefore the kind of salaries that are associated with them. It's important to embrace different levels of expertise in your job structure, and that's where initially we'd lost out with RSEs. Now we're branching out and we've got kind of senior and things like that, which not the best name, but at least now it's recognition of people who have more experience in the field. It's really, really dangerous to have job titles which are effectively job descriptions and say that's all you can do. That's what happens in IT quite a lot, and if you don't fit the job title anymore, well, your job isn't there anymore and they get rid of you. Whereas we all know that computing is a rapidly evolving and changing discipline, and that it's part of our job to keep up with that. So in a way you need to have a fairly general title. And the one thing I would say is just please don't have IT in it. Have research in it. Have something interesting. Don't get labelled with the IT kind of compartment, because that is quite risky. Have something which is more dynamic, and be aware that job titles are national. If you go to the States, they won't know what you're talking about unless you have cyber or cyber infrastructure in the job title.
Yeah, when I say cyber something, my nephew goes, cyborg. Very confusing.
Doctor Who.
Yeah, but very cool. I work with cyborgs. Peter or Emma, would you like to
No,
come in?
go ahead.
So my sort of worry is that if we get something too, well, maybe this is a bit sort of rude about our colleagues in other professional services, that if HR get hold of a term and it becomes sort of both generic and meaningless, and also in a completely opposite, like sort of fixed and means something, and you kind of find yourself wedged into painted into a corner of what you do. So I don't really have any constructive thoughts on it, but like worries about if we have some term that people outside the community get hold of and fix. That means this thing, and then we're sort of stuck with that. So that's something to sort of ruminate on and worry about.
Yeah, and I think you're right that the RSE was successful because we stuck with it. And I don't think anyone thought RSE was the first choice of name. It was like it's good enough, and then run with it. And good, perfect's the enemy of good, I think, ultimately.
And the Met Office have.
Yeah, I mean, we have scientific software engineers, and I think that name had been around for a long time. Like, I'd been at the Met Office 9 years, and it was absolutely well established, like well before I joined. I guess the one thing I wanted to comment on was that within the Met Office and within the science profession, we basically have 3 career families. We have scientists, we have SSE, and we have scientific consultants. And those are the familiar names that we use, at least within the Met Office. So the scientists kind of, like, yes, they're all unique and they all have their own job descriptions, but they're still referred to as scientists, and that's like a family of people that is recognisable within the Met Office. And the same with SSEs. One of the things that's kind of like being raised now as more people are getting familiar with the RSE community, it's like, well, should we change our name? And there's like this mix of people want to be included within the RSE community as an RSE, but then there are other people that are like, well, SSE is kind of like well established at the Met Office, it's kind of like a unique thing, so it kind of makes us, we still feel part of the RSE community, but we're still kind of like a bit special because we've got our own name. So but I still think it fits within the kind of the family of RSE. So
yeah, and I think RSE has always been RSE is an inclusive and welcoming thing. You're an RSE if you think you're an RSE.
Mm-hmm.
Ed, what are your thoughts?
So I think a job title can have an enormous effect on how easy it is to recruit. We have recruited lots of people over the last few years, and RSEs, we tend to get a good number of applicants. Data scientists, we get loads of applicants from all over the world because they know what that is. DevOps engineers, it turns out 1 in 10 people on the planet apply for one of them. When I advertised a research applications specialist, no one knew what it was. And not many people applied. And I can say that because we don't have any active ones at the moment. So you're not all going to immediately go and go, oh, that's the niche way in. Next time we're going to call it RSE because people know what that is. And I was surprised at the effect of the job title. But when we advertised for a DevOps engineer, people thought they knew what it was, and it wasn't what we meant. So we shortlisted 90% of people out because they hadn't read the job description.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think you see the same things a little bit with data scientist and a little bit with MLOps engineer. They from experience, a little bit understanding. But Emma, I think you made a really good point, actually, with the lecturer or the scientist thing. If we think of, at least my university, I think many universities, most staff sit on the academic side when you include the postdocs as well as the permanent staff, which means most staff are covered by professor, lecturer, senior lecturer, postdoc. And then you look at the smaller fraction of the staff, which is the professional services side, and I couldn't even list all of the job descriptions and job titles we have. As I think, as a kind of point maybe to ruminate, how can we as a community actually get back to simplicity so So, because if you go into the public and say I'm a lecturer or I'm a professor, everyone knows, I don't need to explain anything. So I think the route to getting on the drop-down box is by having fewer, possibly. So I'm open to the floor. Anyone have any thoughts or ideas with that, or online as well?
So Martin Wilsoncroft, University of Bradford. I was wondering what the panel thought about data management job titles, because that feels like a sort of a starting world in a way.
Very good question. Anyone would like to volunteer on the panel? And Ed, when you want to volunteer, just shout, and that will, because I will then hear you.
I'm happy to talk.
Well, off you go.
Since I can't wave at you since you turned my screen off. That was a joke, just for the sake of the tape. It is tricky, job titles with data in, because some people think that you want a sort of researcher who's done research with data and data management plans and can do that end of it. Some people think you want a data engineer or a sort of someone who can manipulate data like a data scientist. I think they can be quite confusing job titles.
I think I agree with that completely. I think data, again, it means so many things to so many different people, and AI, sorry, but now that the value of data is what you do with it, and I think now the computer's reached a point where we can really do stuff with big data. It's I would say the manipulation of the data is now the job title, rather than just the data part itself, possibly, but please feel free to disagree with me.
Data processor.
Data processor. Although that does sound a little bit like a part of a computer. Sorry.
Yeah, even for, you said like means many different things to many different people. Even for myself, just data means different things depending on the day of the week. What am I doing? Is data the input or the output?
Completely right. Any comment, Emma?
Just that I did have a previous job role called data process developer. That was a job title that I had previously, so no further comment.
Of course, I find, and again, top of my mind when I was trying to develop the kind of the embark profession, I think top of the mind when we're developing the professions of RSE and other things around the job description, you're really focused to think about what the person is doing, and actually what do you want them to do, and also what kind of like world do you want them to occupy, and what needs are they trying to meet. And so actually it can be very difficult because you're trying to pick almost like a person and you don't know them, so it's like a virtual person you're trying to construct and then hope somebody applies and becomes real. We also need to think of the pathways within which people get into these DRI roles. So there's kind of a question which is, what career paths have you seen successful DRI professionals take? My guess is they're quite random. I think if people keep saying to me, give a career path, and I can't say what a standard career path is. So what pathways have people seen? Maybe I'll start with Emma and then come back this way, and then to Ed.
So a lot of the SSEs at the Met Office, from just anecdotally, are kind of like recovering astronomers. Can't walk anywhere at the Met Office without hitting an ex-astronomer. Yeah, it definitely varies. I think I feel that many of the SSEs that we have at the Met Office do have a science background, so they've done some form of science. Again, not necessarily in meteorology or climate. Again, I'm an astronomer, so but it's definitely that science background. I don't see actually many SSEs at the Met Office that have kind of computer science backgrounds. There are a few, but not so many compared to the science side. We've also had people come from teaching into SSE roles, which is interesting. So yeah, it's just so varied, and it's kind of one of the things that we're looking at in the TDSA is kind of career pathways for kind of data scientists, RSEs, and it's just a really hard thing to define because the role of RSE is so varied. Yeah, like where do you come in? What do you do? Like how can you say like, oh, if your 11-year-old says, I want to be just like you, what do I do?
We
no
definitely
idea.
Definitely don't do that. You need 10 years of Rust programming experience.
Yeah.
Could you want to come in on that point?
I actually had a question. I was kind of saving it, but it feels like it's a good time.
Yeah.
So in July, I am going to a Aspirations Day, which is like a career fair but for sixth formers. And so if I'm talking to like sixth formers, people like finishing their GCSEs, and I'm going to talk to them and be like, you know, yeah, like, well, I'm not a research software engineer, but I'm potentially hoping to change my job title to that because I think I should be, and that's a whole other thing. But if I say to them like I'm a research software engineer, I feel like one of their main questions is going to be, what do I need to study at university to become a research software engineer, and how do I possibly go about starting to answer that question?
Really, really good. Let's work that into this answer as we go now. Peter, your thoughts?
I think most of the somebody used this phrase the other day about failed postdoc. Which is maybe a bit of a loaded term, not what I would use, but I think most of the RSEs that I've seen have come through science. They've done PhD, they've done some postdocs, decided that the science side, they were more interested in the software side, but that can't be career advice, right?
Fail at something first.
Do some postdocs until you get bored and want to do something else. That's not career advice. And what I've seen less, and I think feels more like a reasonable career route, would be, do we have apprenticeships? How do you go from an undergrad? I think it might make sense to, what would be good career advice would be, do a science undergrad or a computer science undergrad, and then have there be some route to get into an RSE. And I don't know if there is such a route. I haven't seen anybody take that route, right? So it doesn't mean that they don't exist. I know that there are masters in RSEs, in RSE, for instance, which would, if I knew there were more of those, I would say, yes, do this. I would love to be able to say that.
In theory, I guess that's almost what it's kind of what I did in a roundabout way. Like I did a physics degree, and then I did a grad scheme, and then the grad scheme I did, it was very good at STFC. Do recommend in scientific computing, but you have to spend 2 years doing 4 6-month placements around different places, and then one of those was in a team where I did research software engineering, but then the head of the grad scheme didn't know that RSE was a job title, so I'm now a software engineer instead of a research software engineer. So I guess what I did is a way in. But
And again, it always makes me feel very happy because I am beginning to see kind of like, I was what I'd call a second generation computational chemist. So my supervisor was taught computational chemistry by the people who first invented computational chemistry. And so I was the first one in the group that kind of went in as a computational chemist and not as a normal chemist to begin with. And I'm seeing now people going in directly as I'm an RSE, and you don't have that pathway backwards, and that's always really gratifying to see.
Yes, no, I don't think there is a path, certainly not a regular one. I would say, although it would seem obvious to say computer science, actually that's not the case. So the thing to remember about RSEs and scientific computing is it's applied, and computer science is hardcore theory and design. So I think you're quite unlikely. There are areas of computer science which do cross over very nicely. Some Macintosh Smith's group do that beautifully, but that's not the general case. So you will usually get, like you say, people moving from generally a science or engineering discipline, but they found they like the computing part of it better than the other part. And I think that's fair enough. If it gives you a scientific inquiring mind, you're a problem solver. That's probably one of the best qualifications. And yeah, failing is really good because, like, coding, writing a program is mostly about failure because once it works, you stop. So having that kind of attitude and way of working is, I think, an essential quality of the job.
Very good. Ed?
I like Simon's point. I think most of the people in our professions would be much closer to computational science than computer science. There are some computer scientists about who become RSEs, but not very many in my experience. There are obviously shed loads of physicists and material scientists and things where when you're doing the research, you have to do coding. We get lots of them. But we also get people who did any old kind of degree, but in their spare time were building computers out of stuff that they bought from magazines or whatever. And those sorts of people can be fantastically valuable. I think that the question you originally asked on this was also a bit the other way up. So where do you go after you've been an RSE or one of the other professions? And I had someone ask me that in an interview, which I thought was an interesting and a very good question. What can I expect to do after I finish doing this job for a few years? And so it's good to be able to say, well, people from my team have gone on to do this and that and the other. And like someone said earlier in the week, they've gone on to do these things and they've got a 50% pay rise when they did it. That's pretty much everyone who leaves my team gets a 50% pay rise. It's probably a good testament that lots of them haven't left yet. But this is part of our story. You know, you come in, you work in these roles and you become hugely valuable to the rest of the UK workforce. And you can go and get an exciting job doing something else if you choose to.
I mean, my view is I don't think you really know what you want to do when you're doing your A-levels. I think some people maybe they do, but whenever you talk to a 16-year-old, 17-year-old and they go, I want to be a professor, they don't know that being a professor means spreadsheets and all of the rubbish, because they only see the good part of the job. So the advice I always have is basically do the thing which really interests you. And if you're doing the thing that really interests you, which is interesting to other people, then you'll have a good career. So don't hide away when you're doing it. And then the other piece of advice, I'm going to check my assumption in the room. Who here did a chemistry or chemistry-related degree? Do a chemistry degree. Pretty much everyone I've met in policymakers, UKRI, DRIs and others did chemistry degrees because you meet chemists everywhere but a chemistry lab. The nature. Do we do chemical engineering in this country anymore? Do we do something? No, we don't. Robots do it.
Who did a physics degree?
Who did a physics degree? Yeah.
Your assumption is low.
It is. And to be honest, my assumption was actually completed. My biggest faux pas when the new team joined was I'd assumed that they hadn't done computer science, and actually 3 members of the new team were computer science graduates. I think that's a testament to how computer science, recent as well, a testament to how computer science has actually evolved in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. That now it's, I'm trying to say, they're more applied, I was going to say more useful, but they're more applied.
Yeah. Can I add something?
Yes, certainly.
I think there's an adjacent profession which we should be very aware of, which I don't think has a job title, which is the people who are in the research groups, but they specialise in the computational side of the discipline. Now, we know that's quite widespread because we're all involved in HPC and stuff like that, and you know, computational science is the 3rd pillar of modern research. But those people who still have the domain interest and specialisation, but also computing, we should have a good name for them because they're very, very valuable, and they're our allies. We're on the infrastructure hardcore, they're on the coalface, if you like.
Yeah, and very difficult careers because computational X, it's like, what are you going to lecture in? Where's the master? If you're academic, where's the master's course for that? Yeah. And yeah, I think a difficult answer.
Sam's got his hand up. I don't know if Sam wants to comment online.
So I just wanted to, and I'm not in person, which is sad because it's not quite as involved being out here. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of give my perspective because my background isn't in computer science or physics or any kind of STEM subject, and I actually came from architectural design, and maybe that makes me a really terrible RSE. I don't know. But it does teach you other things that I think are important in terms of kind of working with complex systems, working with lots of different partners, different disciplines, and also working with people and social sciences and all of those things. And I think it's quite important that we do take people from lots of different backgrounds to ensure that we are still bringing those skills into our profession.
I 100% completely agree with that. I think ultimately I'm almost a champion of people not needing degrees in things. It's basically, it's the practical experience, and it's very much, and I shouldn't say I was in the university, but like, you know, having the practical experience and learning, you know, the craft of it, and I view it very much as a craft rather than a thing. And with my personal background into growing up, I didn't actually realise growing up in a fishing town that you could make money using a computer. And it wasn't only when I went to university, and I went to university as a chemist, because that's what my school said, you should be a chemist. It was only at the university where it was like, there are people using computers and you can be paid for that, and it was like a light bulb moment. I think it's about visibility, you know, making sure kids can see people doing the job and they can imagine themselves doing it. I think is the most important thing. And then we just bring more people into the profession.
If I may bring in another dimension or another keyword in the discussion, it's not people being savvy with one kind of job or other. It's people that do not fear face complexity. That may include physicists, mathematicians. So, yeah, sorry. Complexity, the concept I would like to bring in. Physicists, mathematicians, chemists, engineers, other technical or non-technical traits, biologists, they deal with the ultimate complexity issue. So people that do not fear to face complexity are naturally using computers as a tool to tackle that complex issue. I mean, you cannot write a dissertation on one thing and have it pour out as a philosophical question. You have to explore it in all its dimensionality. So it's the complexity, and of course with that goes chaos, but that's another story.
No, I think you've made a really good point with that, and actually for me, the people who really shine to me when I'm hiring are the people who encounter complexity and then go off and teach themselves how to deal with it. And actually that ability to self-learn, and that I'm interested and curious enough to go after this thing. And because computing has been so revolutionary, I think, those people have naturally gravitated to computers because it's more interesting. You can be doing stuff with them, maybe. So, let me do a question which is on this list. Yes, so complexity and like, you know, the DRI profession, the ability to kind of go out there and learn new things. What support do you think is in place, thinking even back to school, you know, for kids who might be going to the area, what support is in place to enable people to acquire the skills that would make them effective DRI professionals in the future?
Not a lot.
Not a lot, I think that is kind of right.
And particularly not a lot for women.
I think you're completely right there. Anyone else like to comment?
I don't think there's necessarily structured support. There are things that we are doing. There's things like this, for instance. There are things like RSECon. There's things like coding clubs that various run in
institutions that try and get these skills out there. So when we're talking about people fading out of postdocs, we try and teach them when they are postdocs and PhD students some of these skills, so they build them up so that then they can realise there is this profession out of there and get them those skills while they're, because also they're useful. But so in my field, actually, we have a lot of computational science. It's almost all, at least in my sort of niche bit. And so, yeah, having those skills day to day are really important. And so we are doing some things towards that, but it's less structured. And I would like to see more of that. We've now got a new CDT at York in burning plasmas, and that is going to have built into it at least some software engineering skills. So I think things are happening. I would like to see it built in more at like the undergraduate level, but I think it came up earlier in the week. If we're making the case for building these skills into undergraduate programs, it's really difficult because you say, okay, if we're teaching this, what are we not teaching? And that's a really hard argument to make.
I agree, it's very difficult. So I see someone online has raised a hand, and the writing is so small, I apologise that I can't see your name.
Yeah, hi, I'm Saskia, I'm a data scientist at the University of Manchester. So my career path's a bit more unusual because my undergrad is in French and Italian, and I'm now a very experienced data steward. But the whole way I got into it, it wasn't really school. We did computing at school, but if I finished tasks early, we were just kind of left to sit there, and there wasn't really anything given to challenge us. There wasn't any coding clubs or anything. But I got to university, and at Manchester you can take modules in other disciplines, so I got to do some in physics and like science and technology and policy. And then there's this really great initiative called Code First Girls. So if you're a student at universities, you can for free learn how to code either HTML and things like that or Python. And they actually have like businesses who go recruit from there. And that's how I first learned the skills, then did an internship at the university and have learned everything on the job. So I think a lot of it is just making sure there are the more specialised skill and like support systems in place, both at undergrad and then hopefully try and put it down into schools as well.
No, yeah, that's a really lovely initiative that Manchester are running. Again, I think more of that needs to be done. So my brother basically, school messed up their exams. They lost their English paper, which meant the entire year failed English GCSE, which meant they couldn't do A-level, and then they repeated it the next year when they'd lost all their motivation. So he had quite a hard career life. And then later on he discovered coding clubs and other things, and taught his own, obviously taught him programming as well. And then there was a similar course to that, which he went to and basically learned to code in R. I was still great. And through that, he then basically got a job, quite senior data scientist now, within a very important bank in London. And I think no degree, no route. I think this is a very accessible profession. I don't think we have to have 3 or 4 years of background. I think actually it's a craft. And a lot of people coming into this, I think, are doing it on the side. Like who here has a home lab, or who here codes on the side for fun, or like, you know, is like played with computers or done something like that. I think that you get bits of that. So yeah, hopefully we should encourage that in a more structured way, I think is what I'm saying. So
before you move on, can I
comment?
Yeah, just to talk about the skills are the things that I think about are like curiosity and like problem solving, and those things, I mean, I guess aren't taught explicitly, you know, they just kind of come through doing things like science or maths. But one of the things I did want to mention is that at the Met Office, we do a lot of STEM outreach. So I think this was mentioned earlier on in the week as well, but that if you want people to get interested in RSE, you've got to hit school kids. You've got to get people before they're even at A-level, university level. And so the Met Office has quite a wide STEM outreach program where, you know, we go out to schools and we talk to them about whether we have all these fun activities, and just really trying to engage young people and getting them curious and getting them wanting to like be involved in the sort of work that we do. And so yeah, I think that's kind of an important point to make. So.
Cool. So what I want to do is spend the last 10 minutes taking questions from the floor. And I saw a hand go up at the back. Online question.
We've had a few come through in the chat as well. I think they might have been touched on. So how do we bring people into being an RSE from humanities fields, since it's quite hard science heavy?
Very good question, and the major growth area, actually, I think, in terms of the future. So that's, how would the panel do that? Ed has got his hand up. Go on, Ed.
I feel like I should answer that since I have a PhD in theology. I think that it's all about awareness. Like, there are plenty of people about in arts and humanities places who are either already playing around with computers or such things, or have the aptitude to do it, but may not know that we exist. If the physicist doesn't know we exist, why would we expect the, you know, archaeologist to know we exist? So I think it's all about awareness.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a really good phrase which comes from EDI, which is essentially you can't be what you can't see. And, you know, it's about being really visible. I think that's maybe the answer is actually go out there and be visible and not just the physics-based RSEs going hard maths, Fortran, but all of the other RSEs as well coming out and be visible.
I think making in universities in context, make the ancillary and auxiliary programming courses and things widely visible to faculties other than science and engineering.
Yeah,
I think it's simply, like you're saying, simply not visible in some of those faculties, and it should be. There's no reason why an artist can't do computer programming, teach them Python, even just short courses. And I think in perhaps a lot of undergrad courses they don't count for credit, which is a shame. And if they did, that would give a much broader interest for programming, computing to non-traditional disciplines.
I think building on that, you have to make the benefits visible as well, not just here's a thing, but like here's a thing and here's how it could be useful to you, right? So I mean that's part of it, right? Like not just
why it's good. Yeah.
Computers, but like here's how computers could be useful for your discipline, which I guess involves bringing in. So at York we've had, I can't remember what they called it, but for Viking they had a kind of a celebration day of all the research that went on Viking. So, and there were some things that were surprising and interesting research that was going on it, that they could highlight those things. So that was a good way, I thought, to advertise it, at least internally to the university, not, and we still need to do work, in outreach as well. But like, I thought that was a nice way of not just highlighting in general, but the specifics and particulars as well.
So in the last, put some hands up. So hand at the back, and then I'll come forward. Dun, dun, dun.
So I just wanted to add to that. Part of my role is to go out and help researchers try this kind of technique on kind of very small scope projects to see if it's going to do stuff for their research. And we do that a lot with kind of musicians, we do it a lot with the arts and humanities faculties, and I'm free at point of use, and you get between 2 and 10 days of my team's time to try something and fail at it quickly, because researchers are so time poor that they want to know that if they go away and learn Python, that it's going to do something for their research. So they don't make the time to go and do it until we've shown them on their actual research in a couple of days that it's going to have an impact. And when we do that, we suddenly see them go, right, I'm going to prioritise going and learning that, or I'm going to prioritise costing an RSE into my grant, or I'm going to make sure that I hire someone with these skills into the research group. So having that kind of little bit of free upfront time is what has started bringing all of our humanities and arts colleagues along with us gradually. We can't get to everyone, there's only 4 of us in the university, but we can bring them, start bringing them on that journey. But I think for everyone it's that thing of if I learn art, is that the right thing for my discipline? And people don't even know how to make that decision from some of those backgrounds. They might go in and learn Python and then discover that everybody else in social sciences has gone down the R route, and all the packages and everything they want to use is actually along there. So it's that kind of upfront help and guidance that we find does really help at Nottingham. So yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I think we forget how completely time poor researchers are, and also how bewildering it is. Programming languages are not named useful things. Cool.
Oh,
I do want to respond to
that. And those people that you help, you help them 2 days and they go away and learn it. They can be really great ambassadors for their colleagues. That they can explain in their language and their field's jargon about the benefits of it. That can sometimes be a difficult barrier to breach of using the correct words to advocate for the things that we think are useful, and getting the people that already know those words to advocate for you and for our field can be really useful.
So I have a question more about mainly just RSE, but I guess DRI in general, as a profession. So, and it ties back to something you said earlier about removing IT from job titles. So I am a member of BCS, and I'm hoping to become chartered. And if I come chartered with BCS, I will be a chartered IT professional. And I guess if you're an RSE, I guess you kind of have the choice of you go for BCS, or you go for whatever science discipline, like IOP, and you could become like a chartered physicist, right? But do you think, like, are we close to maybe getting to the point where if you wanted to get more professionally recognised in like RSE, could it be more than just being a chartered IT professional?
So is there anyone from the society here who could answer that? Because my knowledge is old.
Is there something I don't know about?
No, well, I'm from the society, but I'm yeah, I don't have an answer to that. But I think it is a thing that people are, there'll be others interested in, and the society Slack and like interest groups and things are a good way to pull that sort of thing together. And we've got folks who are like hooked into the BCS and stuff.
As a former society trustee from a couple of years ago as well, we're sort of covering the history of the Society of RSE here. That's been a thing that's been it's come up every 2 or 3 years for basically the entire history of the RSE movement. And there's never been a real consensus on whether we thought it was actually the right thing to do or not. Because to do that, it means that you need to define what is an RSE, and we still are deliberately not doing that. And personally, I think that's the right thing to do, is to deliberately not define RSE too strictly. And I think I would apply sort of that thinking across other professions. But certainly I see the advantage to doing that. But yeah, ongoing discussion.
It's the balance between gatekeeping and recognition. And I think at the beginning, gatekeeping was a fear, but I think moving into the future, recognition might become a benefit.
So maybe a softer version of this. There's a big buzz at the moment for like a RSE competency sort of toolkit. So there's a Slack channel that basically I think named that. Dave Horsfall's been sort of pushing it forward, but lots of people have got interested. And I think that sort of thing about what does it mean to be a different shape. I think some of the folks who we welcome into the RSE community would call themselves something different. Lots of people in this room, I imagine, wouldn't call themselves an RSE. Not just what's their job title, but what would they pick. So I think this thing of how can we all be doing this sort of work in different shapes, and do some of those shapes look enough like each other and differently from others that we give them a different name. I think this is all a sort of conversation that can be done even without sort of putting like a qualification or a certification on the end of it.
Cool. In that case, we'll go to the last question.
Can I just add one thing there? BCS is one thing, and I used to be a member, but it got more IT orientated, more business computing, and I lost interest. Look at the ACM. Join them, and that gets you a discount off supercomputing. And they do have like scientific and HPC streams within the ACM. It's a much bigger organisation than BCS.
And then can I just follow on from the comments about the RSE competencies toolkit? So yeah, the Slack channel is RSE competencies toolkit, and we meet monthly at the moment to discuss progress on the tooling and advertising, and so this is kind of one of the things I'm trying to do here. So yeah, so either get in touch on the Slack channel or like come talk to me.
Thanks. A really interesting discussion, actually. These are mostly comments, I guess. So firstly, Sam's assertion that he comes from a design background, architectural design. So I was in a 2-week-long design festival at Lancaster, the grant that's closing. I'm convinced that design is a STEM subject now, absolutely. So that was number one. Out of that conference came a really interesting exercise or research project, really, that the guys had done, which speaks to what you were saying, Emma. They'd gone into one of our local primary schools and they'd given the kids a piece of text-to-image AI, and the exercise was for the kids to describe image and make images. And apparently, the kids self-selected into those who were kind of more interested in using the software to generate different images and be creative with it, that kind of thing. And the other half of the classroom who were interested in how it worked. And it's those guys that are going to be the guys that invent the next generation of AI in a few years. And I feel it's those guys that we need to nurture through the system. Lastly, the way that we're trying to tackle the kind of software literacy problem with our new Mathematics for AI and Real World Systems grant is to actually build in software engineering right from day one in undergraduate maths. And actually have that as a module that runs with the students throughout all 3 years of their degree. And then, building on that into a master's program and PhD, actually have opportunities for students to actually go out and engage with the RSE community with the thought of becoming an RSE. What we think there is actually one of the skills that sets RSEs apart from maybe industry software engineers, like web developer or something, is that actually an RSE can pick up a scientific paper, can read an algorithm, and then can recreate that algorithm in software. And that's the skill that I need in my research group with my stats hat on. And I think that's the defining feature. That's why RSEs tend to come from physics, strongly, etc. background, chemistry.
Really, who would like to respond?
Yeah, can I follow on? So one of the other things that we do at the Met Office is that we're trying to really improve our early career kind of support, and we do things like industrial placements and apprenticeships. So if you're kind of putting these plans in place for your degrees, that you could consider doing like gap years, and then people like the Met Office would happily accept industrial placements where you can come in an SSE team and you can learn on the job a little bit more about that sort of role.
We'll talk later.
Excellent. Anyone else? One final point from the panel?
Well, I would also like to talk to you about building into undergraduate courses. So one of the things you said then, one of the, maybe not defining features of RSE, but something on the RSEs towards my end of the spectrum that is RSE, is about having like domain knowledge, right? It's not just you're good with computers, but you can talk to researchers and you can pick up a paper and you can understand that paper and the computational. You don't have to be an expert on those things, but you can understand that, and I think that's and the algorithm, right, and all the things that entails, and coding it up and all this. But you can speak to researchers about the research directly without having to do some translation. And maybe that isn't true for everybody in the RSE space, but towards my end of the spectrum, I think that is a defining feature.
I think my personal test for when Gen AI is here is basically you can pick up a scientific paper and write a performant HPC application to implement the results, and I firmly believe that is not in the next 10 years, so please keep studying. So I think we've got a little bit over time. I hope that was okay, but thanks so much to the panel, thanks so much to the audience. It's been a really nice conference. I am leaving this evening, so I've really enjoyed my time. I hope everyone has had fun as well, and thank you, Ed, as well. Well done, we've got the next thing at 4 o'clock.
Is that the end?